Good morning, everyone. I'm from University of Maryland, College Park, and my presentation today is about motor sequence learning from childhood to adulthood. And we investigate motor sequence learning from a different perspective. And we study the online offline learning process. So it means we study how children and adults learn motor sequence, not just assess their performance in this task. So sequential movement is very important in our daily life because, let me take a toy example. If there's a coffee cup in front of you and you want to grasp the cup and drink some coffee, the order of the movement is you reach to the cup and grasp the cup and then feed the coffee in your mouth, right? So little baby can do the things, but sometimes if you mess up the order, something will happen. I did exactly the same thing to broke my laptop. So if I grasp first and then reach, I will knock off the glass and spill the milk or coffee on my laptop. Right? Even worse, if you can grasp the cup, but you close your mouth first before you're feeding coffee into the mouth, then bad thing will happen. So this toy example just demonstrates that sequence learning is very important in our daily life, and we need to learn motor sequence from childhood to adulthood all the time. Because, for example, decision making with the movement is important. We need to learn how to ride a bike. We need to learn how to drive a car. And speaking is also motor sequence movement. And problem solving is a cognitive ability that you need to solve a problem step by step, and sometimes it involves movement. And of course, motor skill learning, like you play soccer, play badminton, all the sports. So in laboratory, there's one popular task which is called serial reaction time task. Researchers use it to assess the motor sequence learning ability from childhood to adulthood. The task is participants sit in front of the monitor and which has 4 or more stimulus on the screen. And the participants need to press corresponding keys to respond the stimulus as fast as they can. And normally, underlying the sequence of the stimulus, we normally use the fixed repeated sequence. So, for example, there are 8 element sequence. Then in one learning block, the participant will do the same 8 element sequence 10 times or 12 times. So then in this way they can learn the motor sequence. And the motor sequence learning is assessed by the mean reaction time in each block. So for example, the bottom figure shows the mean reaction time from learning block 1 to block 6. So they decrease their mean reaction time from block 1 to block 4, which have the same repeated sequence. And then suddenly, the experimenter provides a novel sequence, either a random sequence or either another fixed sequence. Then participant reaction time will increase, which shows they learn the previous sequence they practiced in the block 1 and block 4. But, and previous study report that there is not an age effect in motor sequence learning because children and adults all show the same pattern. The only difference is adults' reaction time is faster than children. But their learning from block 1, block 4 is the same. They increase from block 4 to block 5 is the same. So they demonstrate there's no age effect. But there are 2 limitations for the SRT task. The first one is many daily activities require posture control. So we cannot always sit in front of the computer and just do finger tapping. So that's require we design a motor sequence learning task with posture control to assess more general motor sequence learning in our daily life. So the first research question in our study is there an age effect of motor sequence learning that requires posture control? If the motor sequence learning mechanism is universal, we should find the same pattern between the finger tapping task and posture control task. And the second limitation is through the measurement of reaction time, they found there's no age effect. But if the researcher do a poster survey to check with participants, adults will show more declarative knowledge of the sequence. In other words, they will verbally recall, recognize more sequence to be practiced. But children normally cannot do that. So we define that as implicit learning. So children do not know they learn sequence. And sometimes they do not know they learn something. So if adults' learning is caused by declarative knowledge and the children's learning is induced by implicit knowledge, so there must be difference in the way they learn the sequence, which is one of our research questions. Are there age effects on the process of motor sequence learning? So we not only assess their performance, we measure their process, how they reach that performance level. So our task, we extended SRT task to the whole body movement task. So it's like a whack-a-mole game on your feet. There are 6 targets on the screen, but we do not just change the color. We do a little, so every time there's a little mouse comes up, then participants need to step on the mouse head as fast as they can, like a whack-a-mole game. And we do 2 sequences. For the block 1 to block 4, we do sequence 8, which is 10 element sequence, but we repeat 10 times. So this is a 100 element sequence in each block, from block 1 to block 4. And then suddenly we change the sequence A to sequence B, which is totally different sequence, and to assess if the participant learned sequence A or not. And there are time interval for between each 2 successive stimulus is 1.5 seconds. The reason why we choose this time interval is because 6 years kids cannot do shorter interval, so we balance the stimulus interval. And this is what we found. This is the mean reaction time across blocks. So you can see 60-year-olds, 10 years olds, and adults, 20 years old adults, all decrease their mean reaction time from block 1 to block 4. And then when they were provided with a novel sequence in block 5, their reaction time all increased. So we demonstrate that all of those groups learn the motor sequence. And the change from block 1 to block 4 are the same across all blocks. But recall that we use the mean reaction time, but there's a 100 elements underlying this mean reaction time. So if you check the process, how they reach the performance. The pink color is for 6 years olds. You can see within each block, their reaction time actually increased a lot. But the blue lines, 20 years olds, adults, their reaction time series continues to decrease as the results of other motor learning paradigm like visual motor adaptation. But 10 years olds, they continue to decrease the reaction time, but then at the later part of the experiment, they increase within block. And let's go back to the 6 years olds. They increase reaction time within block, but their mean reaction time decreased actually. So there must be something happen between the blocks. If you check the end of the previous block and the beginning of the next block, you will see there's a dramatic drop of the reaction time during the break, which is just 3 minutes. Then second block to 3 block, there's a huge drop. So we statistically analyze those offline learning and online learning between children and adults. So this one just repeat the trend of the process, but we group each cycle of the sequence, which is 10 elements. So we got 10 mean reaction time within each block. Then we do the statistical analysis. This one shows the within block learning rate, which is what we call online learning rate. The blue line is adults. The negative means they decrease their reaction time within block. And you can see they start from negative value, which means they decrease reaction time within block, and then the online learning rate keep increasing with their learning. This one measures the difference between the last cycle of previous block and the first cycle of the current block. Check the blue bar shows the adults didn't improve any reaction time between block, which means their improvement of reaction time only happens during the block. And we check the offline because 6-year-olds increase their reaction time within block, so we cannot compare the offline directly by the last block and the first cycle of the previous and the current block. So we compare the performance at the beginning of each block, which is the first cycle of each block, the mean reaction time. You can see all groups decrease the reaction time from block 1 to block 4, and then increase from block 4 to block 5. Because children didn't increase within block, so this decrease must be due to the improvement of reaction time during break, which is 3 minutes. So these results demonstrate adults learn online. They show the online learning, which is trial-by-trial adaptive process. And younger children show offline learning, which is they improve reaction time during break. And more importantly, we do a poster survey to assess if adults and children can record the sequence they practice. And the results shows adults can verbally demonstrate more sequence elements they practice, but children cannot. And so this result suggests that offline or online learning is associated with the acquired declarative knowledge. If you acquire less declarative knowledge, you will show offline learning. If you acquire more declarative knowledge, you will show online learning. But we want to know if this is the case. So we want to investigate if adults can show offline learning too in another task, which is totally implicit, because they learn the task explicitly here. So it's just a conclusion. And emphasize one point: the online learning in adults, which may be error-based, because we do a simulation study here. We use a simple recurrent network. You can see the mean reaction time decrease and then increase, and the process within each block is similar with adults' performance. This is the error-based simulation method, so we argue that adults' learning may be error-based, but children didn't update their reaction time within block, so they may not rely on the error. Okay, so now we want to assess if adults can produce offline learning, if they do implicit learning. So, so we design another task which is similar stimulus interval, but we use a different task. Now this time the sequence is produced by Markov chain, which is a stochastic process. So the elements always change. For example, this is 6 targets, and if the first target is number 1, here the next targets can be any one of the rest of 5. But with a probabilistic structure. So, for example, first step is number 1. Next step has a higher chance to go to number 2 here, but least the chance to go back to itself, which is number 1. So this is probabilistic. We use the probabilistic sequence from block 1 to block 4, and then we suddenly change the sequence to a random sequence in block 5. And this time we will also add 2 blocks, which is block 7 and block 8. Block 7 we use the same sequence with block 1 to block 4 because we want to make sure the participants return to their learning level after they face to the interference on block 5 here. And the block 8 we use another probabilistic sequence, which is different sequence but produced by the same Markov chain model. So block 1 and block 8 have the same, different sequence but produced by the same structure. Okay. If participants can learn the structure of the sequence, they can generalize their learning to block 8. So here's the result. This is the mean reaction time. So you can see this is 6 years old. They decrease their reaction time from block 1 to block 4 and increase block 5, which demonstrates they learn the sequence. And then their performance at block 8 is lower than block 1, which means they generalize their learning to to a similar but not identical sequence they learn. But you see the blue line here, adults didn't improve their performance at all. If you provide block 5, the increase from block 4 and block 5 is not statistically significant, so which means they didn't learn the sequence. And the red line is 10 years old. We kind of learn the sequence, but we need more subject to demonstrate the effect. And now we go to the process. Children produce the same learning process. They increase the reaction time within each block and drop a lot between blocks. Now look at the blue line, which is demonstrating the adults learning. Their online learning disappeared. They never update their learning within block. Their learning process increased within block and drop a little bit during the break. So, which means their online learning disappear and they start to show offline learning in this implicit sequence learning test. And because all of these participants increase their performance within block, so and increase with a different rate, so the mean reaction time within each block cannot represent the general learning effect very well. So we compare the first 20 elements within each block. So you can see here, the learning effect in 6 years old is even significant than the mean reaction time within block. And their generalization in block 5, block 8 is larger than generalization in adults and 10 years old, which means they learn more the structure of the Markov chain of stochastic process. Children have more offline gains. This is also shown in the fixed sequence learning. And the adults' learning is disturbed by the interference from block 5, because if you compare the block 6 to block 4, they are all at the same level. And if you compare block 6 and block 3, because the blue line, because adults learn the sequence at block 4, but their performance gets worse after they encounter the interference on block 5. But look at 6 years old data. Even though they perform an interference, another sequence, they go back to the previous level, which is learn the probabilistic sequence, right after they perform the perturbation, which is the sequence, another sequence in block 5. So that demonstrates adults' learning is disturbed by interference from the novel sequence. So what we got? The results we got demonstrate the whole body and the finger sequence learning may share the same underlying mechanism, because these two tasks, as reported in our study and the literature, all participants decrease the reaction time from block 1 to block 4, and when they face to a novel sequence, they increase the reaction time. Even though, in this case, the positive controllability is age-related, but the sequence learning effect, which in this task, which requires the path control, the learning effect does not relate to age. And second major finding is there's an age effect on the process of motor sequence learning, but not on the performance of motor sequence learning. Especially children and adults show different learning process, and those two learning process is associated with implicit and explicit learning. And last one, we don't have the final conclusion, but our data give us some clue, shows that children may have better implicit learning ability because they can generalize the learning to other situations, which is the real purpose of learning. And the second is children may generalize the learning. Second one. First one, children may have better implicit learning because they show offline learning process, and we demonstrate that offline learning process is related to the implicit learning. And last finding is children's learning may have higher resistance to a novel situation. So they can generalize better, and they have higher resistance to the novel situation. So last, this is my first time I thanks my advisor and Dr. Joe Whitall and Dr. Marcel
First time?
Alvera. First time in conference. First time in conference. And thanks the model development team at the University of Maryland, and this study is supported by the Graduate Research Initiative Project at the University of Maryland College Park. And thank you.
So the data that you originally motivated to study, where you said there was no age effect on this sequence learning, was that data analyzed in a process way like you showed as well, to show that it's independent of the limb?
No. There's no any study done the processing.
So you don't know if those are the same, actually?
Yeah.
That might be a possible effect.
Yeah.
So that would be interesting. And the other thing is that you say that adults use error-based learning and children are implicit learners. What does implicit mean?
Implicit means children just do the task. They don't know there's a sequence. I emphasize one point. Before the experiment, the participants don't know there's a sequence behind the stimulus.
And so what is the basis of their learning then?
Right.
Such as you say adults use error-based learning. What is the basis of the learning when it's called implicit?
Error-based learning, they may use the anticipation error. So they think they will anticipate the next step, and then compare their anticipation with the real stimulus, then they correct their movement. Correct?
That's just an idea, though. It's not really know that.
Yeah, we don't have the evidence to show that when we do a simulation study, which demonstrates the same process between the model and the adult learning measurement.